The first light of dawn crept over the Wyoming hills, brushing the frost from the tall grass and casting long gold shadows across the prairie. A lone rider appeared on the ridge, his silhouette sharp against the pale sky, hoarse breath steaming in the cold. The wind hummed low, whispering through the empty fields where no crops had grown since the drought. Down below, a weathered farmhouse leaned against the horizon, its roof sagging, its fence half broken, its chimney coughing thin gray smoke into the morning air. Inside, a widow moved quietly, stirring weak cornmeal for 3 sleepy children who waited with hollow eyes and brave smiles. The rider slowed his horse and pulled a worn envelope from his coat, the paper soft from weeks of travel. He'd come to deliver a dead man's wages, a promise too long delayed. But as he dismounted and saw the faces inside that cabin, something in him shifted, because what he found there wasn't just poverty. It was grace. It was the year 1883, when Wyoming still wore the scars of its own making, dust, drought, and silence stretching farther than a soul could see. Clara Dawson's cabin sat at the edge of that emptiness, a patch of weathered boards clinging to the land like a stubborn prayer. The barn door groaned each time the wind passed, its hinges tired but loyal. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke, flour dust, and worn-out hope. Her husband, Samuel, had died 2 winters before on a cattle drive that promised good pay and never delivered. All that came back was his hat and the word sorry. Still, Clara stayed. The land might have stolen her laughter, but it was all she had left. On the shelf by the window lay a faded family Bible, pages curled, names fading, her last link to gentler days. Outside, a hawk cried across the valley, sharp and lonely as her heart. Eli Mercer removed his hat as he stepped into the dim cabin, his boots leaving muddy prints on the warped floorboards. Clara Dawson looked up from the stove, her hands trembling just slightly as she tightened her shawl. The man's eyes were tired but kind, framed by dust and miles. "Ma'am," he said softly, holding out an envelope creased from travel. "Name's Eli Mercer. Rode from Cheyenne. Your husband Samuel Dawson was owed wages. I came to see they reached his kin. A man's due, too long delayed." Clara didn't move. She'd heard words like that before, and they'd always turned to ash. "You're a little late for kindness," she said, her voice calm but sharp. From the corner, her eldest boy, Thomas, barely 12, raised a rifle that looked far too big for his shaking arms. "Mama, you want me to?" She hushed him with a glance. Ellie's face tightened, but he didn't reach for his gun. He simply set the envelope on the table beside a chipped tin cup. "Do what you will with it." Then he turned, stepping back into the cold. Moments later, Clara watched through the window as he stooped by her broken fence, hammering loose boards back into place, each strike echoing through the hollow valley. She couldn't tell if he was a good man or another ghost come to haunt her. As dusk settled, the prairie turned the color of old copper, and Eli lingered near the barn, mending the last of the rails. He caught voices drifting from the cabin, soft, low, too many for one family. Curiosity tugged him closer. Through the frost-laced window, he saw not just Clara's 3 children, but 5 more, thin, barefoot, their faces pale with hunger. One girl couldn't have been more than 6, clutching a cracked doll with no head. Another boy coughed into a rag that once might have been white. Clara moved among them, ladling the thinnest soup Eli had ever seen. Her face calm, though her eyes were tired beyond years. She broke her own bread in half and pressed it into a child's trembling hands, whispering comfort as though she believed it still mattered. Eli stood there in the cold, heart tight with something he couldn't name. In that moment, he saw her not as a widow but as the quiet backbone of a broken valley. The wind began to rise after sundown, a mournful sound that swept through the valley like a ghost returning home. By nightfall, the snow came thick, relentless, swallowing every path and fence post. Eli finished securing the horses and was heading to the barn, when the roof gave way under the weight of the storm, timbers cracking like gunfire. He barely leapt clear in time, snow and splinters burying what was left of the shelter. Clara opened the door against the blizzard, lantern light spilling out in gold ribbons. For a long second, their eyes met hers, wary, his pleading. Finally, she stepped aside. "You can warm yourself by the fire," she said flatly. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight, and the quiet breathing of sleeping children. Eli sat near the hearth, steam rising from his coat. After a long silence, he spoke. "Clara, I worked for Markson's outfit, the same man who cheated your Samuel. I was on watch the night he fell." His voice cracked. "I tried to save him. Failed him. Been carrying that weight ever since." Clara's face hardened, pale as the snow against the window. She said nothing, only stared, her silence colder than the wind itself. The storm had raged for hours when lightning ripped through the sky, so bright it turned night into day for one terrible instant. A deafening crack followed, then the smell of smoke. Clara was the first to see it, a dull orange glow through the snow. "The barn!" she gasped. Before she could stop him, Eli was already through the door, coat thrown over his head, boots sinking deep in the drift. The blaze had swallowed half the roof, sparks twisting upward like angry spirits. He tore at the latch, shouting hoarsely as frightened horses kicked and screamed inside. He freed one, then another, before a beam gave way and struck his shoulder. The air filled with choking black smoke. Inside the cabin, Clara shouted his name, but the wind stole her voice. She ran out, shawl over her face, and found him collapsed in the snow, coughing, his hands blistered and raw. Without hesitation, she dragged him through the drifts, every muscle trembling with fear and fury. When they reached the porch, he whispered, "I couldn't let it all burn." She held him close, tears cutting paths down her soot-streaked cheeks. In that shattered moment, her anger melted because forgiveness had found its way through the fire. 3 days passed before the sun returned, bright and cold over a world reborn in white. The valley lay hushed beneath the snow, every fence post crowned in frost, every tree heavy with silence. Inside the cabin, Eli stirred from fevered sleep, the scent of smoke still clinging to his bandages. When he opened his eyes, he saw Clara through the window out in the yard, her skirts brushing snow as she hammered a new frame where the barn once stood. The children worked beside her, laughing faintly, their breath silver in the air. Eli rose unsteadily, found the envelope on the table where he'd left it, and stepped outside. "You never opened it," he said. Clara turned, cheeks red from the cold. She took the envelope, weighed it in her hands, then pressed it back into his palm. "Use it for the others," she said softly. "The ones with no one left." Eli nodded, words failing him. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, like a man forgiven, and given a reason to keep riding. The storm may have passed, but its echo lingers, in the valley, in the cabin, and maybe in the hearts of everyone who's ever lost something they couldn't get back. Eli Mercer rode away at dawn, his figure fading into the endless white, carrying not just the widow's forgiveness, but a burden turned into purpose. Clara stood on the porch, her children at her side, watching until the horizon swallowed him whole. The wind was calm now, almost tender, as if the land itself had exhaled. "And now, I turn to you. If a man who wronged your family rode to your door in the dead of winter, would you forgive him? Could you? Or would you send him back into the storm to face his own ghosts alone? Tell us what your heart says, down in the comments. Sometimes the hardest road a person can travel is the one that leads home. In the Old West, most folks believed survival belonged to the toughest, the ones who could draw fastest, ride hardest, or shut their hearts to pain. But Clara Dawson proved there's a different kind of strength, one that doesn't come from iron or gunpowder. It comes from mercy. When she forgave Eli Mercer, she didn't undo the past. She rewrote what it meant. Her choice didn't make her weak, it made her whole. Because forgiveness isn't surrender. It's freedom, plain and simple. It's the moment when bitterness loses its grip and a person can finally breathe again. Out there on the Wyoming frontier, where justice was often bought or stolen, Clara showed that grace is the one thing no storm, no sin, can ever take away. As the soft strum of a guitar fades beneath the sound of the wind, the camera drifts over the snow-covered valley one last time. The cabin, the rebuilt barn, the smoke rising gently into a golden sky. The narrator's voice comes warm and steady, like an old friend beside the fire. If this story touched your heart, saddle up with us again next week for another true tale of courage and grace from the American frontier. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances and in the power of forgiveness.